Title: At an elite family dinner, my wife's father mocked my small business. He didn't know I was his biggest client. He sneered. He can't even afford a proper office. He's my daughter's biggest mistake. Then his top client stood up. Actually, that's my son. I smiled as my father-in-law's face went pale. He had no idea. Chapter 1. The dinner. The chandeliers glittered over the long, polished mahogany table. Waiters glided between guests, pouring wine that probably cost more than a month's rent. This wasn't just dinner. This was theater. Her family loved reminding me of my place. At the head of the table sat Richard, my wife's father, towering CEO of a multinational empire. His silver cufflinks flashed in the light as he raised his glass. His words were polished sharp and cold. He leaned back, surveying the table, then fixed his gaze on me. "Tell me," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "how's that little hobby of yours? That tiny business? Still running it from that shoebox office?" Laughter rippled around the table. My wife's sister giggled. My mother-in-law smirked. Even some business associates chuckled politely, eager to stay in Richard's favor. Then he delivered the final blow. My daughter deserves better. Marrying down, that's my biggest mistake. My wife's hand clenched her wine glass. She didn't speak. Before I could respond, a man at the far end of the table, one of Richard's prized clients, pushed back his chair. His voice cut through the laughter. "Actually, that so-called tiny business belongs to my son." The room froze. Richard's face went white. I leaned forward, smiling softly. "You really had no idea, did you?" Chapter 2. The Reveal. Silence pressed down on the dining hall. Forks hovered midair. Wine glasses trembled. Every eye darted between Richard and the man standing at the end of the table. That man was Charles Whitmore, one of Richard's biggest clients. Contract alone accounting for nearly a third of the company's revenue. To Richard, Charles wasn't just untouchable, he was untouchable. Charles adjusted his jacket, eyes locked on Richard. "I didn't realize you spoke so casually about your son-in-law," he said, "especially when his company has managed half of my private investment portfolio for the last 3 years. Whispers rippled down the table. Richard blinked, confused. "What? What are you talking about?" Charles gave me the smallest nod. "Tell him what you've built." I leaned back, deliberate. "That shoebox office, it was only the start. We now manage assets in real estate, logistics, and tech ventures, including 3 subsidiaries your departments rely on without knowing it." Richard's color drained further. Charles delivered the final blow. "Richard, I wouldn't even be doing business with your company if it weren't for him. He vouched for you. Without him, my contract vanished." Shock rippled through the room. My wife's sister's smirk vanished. Even my wife looked stunned. Richard's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I leaned in, a smile tugging at my lips. "You always assumed I was beneath you, but while you laugh at my so-called tiny business, I was building something you couldn't afford to lose." Tension shattered like glass. The mighty CEO had been exposed, and this was just the beginning. Chapter 3. Cracks in the armor. Richard's fork clattered onto his plate. A man used control, now trembling as the floor seemed to shift beneath him. "You manage what?" His booming voice now sounded small. I didn't rush. Every word mattered. Multiple companies, subsidiaries, holding firms, the kind your legal team could spend years untangling. While you tore me down, I built something independent of your empire. In fact, your empire relies on me. Whispers erupted. Richard's wife tugged at his sleeve, pale. "Is this true? You never said—" Charles leaned back, savoring the spectacle. "Richard, maybe next time you should check who you're mocking before calling him your daughter's biggest mistake. Because if he pulls his contracts, half your investors will follow. I'll be the first." The blow landed harder than any punch. Richard tried to laugh. It sounded hollow. I let a slow smile spread. "You wanted me out of your family, Richard. But it's not so easy when my hand is on the lever holding your empire steady." I raised my glass slightly. "Here's to family dinners. They reveal true worth." Silence answered. Richard finally understood. The man he mocked to dismantle him, brick by brick, contract by contract. and I intended to. Chapter 4, The Retaliation. Dinner ended in fractured silence. Richard didn't speak, but fury simmered in his bloodshot eyes. For a man built on dominance, humiliation in his own domain was intolerable. 2 nights later, subtle signs appeared. Smaller contracts were under review. Clients received anonymous warnings about unstable leadership. Richard was clawing back his dignity behind the scenes. What he didn't know, I prepared years ago. While he played King of the Hill, I built patience, redundancies, networks, safeguards. And I had something he didn't. The truth. His empire was rotten inside. Accounts funneled overseas. Failing ventures propped with shady loans. Liabilities quietly shifted to subsidiaries poised to collapse. And I had the files. Years ago, while still a small business joke, Richard had handed me old financial records, thinking it was beneath him. I kept copies. His retaliation became my opportunity. I picked up the phone. Charles, I think it's time your board sees what Richard has been hiding. I'll forward everything. A pause and a chuckle. Son, you're about to turn a bruise into a broken jaw. Exactly as intended. Chapter 5. The collapse begins. The boardroom smelled of tension and cologne. Richard sat at the head of the table, tied tight, trying to project dominance. But whispers started before I entered. Charles, my biggest client, and now Richard's largest stakeholder, stood at the far end with a folder. A subtle nod. Richard sneered. This is private. You don't belong here. Charles interrupted sharply. He belongs here more than you realize. Sit down, Richard. Richard obeyed, jaw tight. For once, not in control. I set down a laptop, connected the projector. First slide appeared. Spreadsheets, transfers, account numbers, all tied to Richard, offshore shell corporations. Gasps filled the room. Richard slammed his fist. This is taken out of context, fabricated. I pressed play. Richard's own voice filled the room. Shift the losses into the Cayman accounts. The board will never see it. By the time they catch on, I'll have cashed out. Cold silence. His face drained. He looked around. No allies. Charles leaned forward. You call my son a mistake. Mocked him at your table. Today, Richard, you've made your last mistake. Effective immediately, you're removed as CEO pending investigation. Richard shot to his feet, trembling. You did this to me. I smiled calmly. No, Richard, you did this to yourself. I just showed them who you really are. Board members filed out murmuring about auditors and police. Richard froze, his empire crumbling. Fear, real fear, in his eyes for the first time in years. Chapter 6. Public downfall. Within 48 hours, headlines exploded. CEO under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Respected businessman removed. The empire Richard built on arrogance and intimidation collapsed under truth. At the next family dinner, the same gilded hall where he humiliated me, the room was ice cold. His wife whispered harshly, "How could you?" His daughter refused to meet his eyes. My wife sat in silence, hands clenched. Every phone buzzed with the same news. His face plastered across headlines. Then came the final humiliation. Investors who once courted with cigars and brandy publicly declared support for Charles and his son's business, merging it into their global network. Richard's company finished. Mine soared beyond imagination. Chapter 7. Poetic Justice. Weeks later, I spoke at Charity Gala, not as a nobody's son-in-law, but as a partner in one of the country's most influential ventures. Applause thundered. From the shadows, Richard stood hollow-eyed, alone, once commanding fear, now whispers in shame. Our eyes met. He opened his mouth, maybe to curse, maybe to beg. I raised my glass slowly. The same toast I gave him the night. He called me pathetic. Only now, the room applauded me, not him. Epilogue, the lesson. In the quiet afterward, I reflected. Revenge wasn't humiliation or payback. It was balance, reminding the arrogant that no empire built on cruelty lasts forever. Richard mocked my small business, underestimated me. He destroyed himself. I merely illuminated the truth. The sweetest victory? I didn't just win. I built something my son could inherit with pride. Real power isn't in tearing others down. It's in rising above and ensuring they never forget the day they tried to bury you. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Comment below. Like if you think it was. Share with someone who needs this energy. Subscribe for more jaw-dropping tales of betrayal and justice. Here, every lie meets reckoning. Every betrayal finds its shadow. Stay sharp, stay strong, stay tuned.